I'm joined on the set by Solange Mougin for today's press review. Hi, Solange.
Hi, Jeannie.
Lots of focus still on the escalating tensions surrounding Ukraine.
Yeah, the time for olive branches may be over. At least that is the view of the Russian paper Nezavisaya Gazeta. Even if it does cover this weekend's volley of diplomatic calls, the paper says that for the first time, Western leaders are discussing when to implement sanctions as, quote, the aggravation of the situation gets worse, they say. And this view that there is no other way than to invade, well, it could be Russia shifting the narrative. At least that is the viewpoint of the Kiev Independent. It says, quote, a tidal wave of misinformation is being unleashed from Russian sources to convince citizens in Russia of the need for war. Nonetheless, Courrier International takes us through the frenetic back and forth by Emmanuel Macron as he spent hours on the phone with Moscow and Washington this past weekend, noting with praise Macron's push for a summit. But as the Kremlin has now noted, a summit is not guaranteed to occur.
The press also today talking about sanctions and whether or not they even carry enough weight.
Yeah, Politico has an interesting article about the UK's sanctions plan. And the EU site predicts London would take a middle road between Brussels and Washington. It says that 10 Downing Street may end up, quote, being less bullish on enforcement than Washington, but more agile than the EU, where consensus is needed. But The Guardian says Johnson's sanctions rhetoric must be taken with a grain of salt. While the government touts its sanctions plan as the toughest ever, it has a major loophole, they say, according to The Guardian, which is that this loophole is that sanctions do not touch property owned by anonymous offshore accounts, many of which are, in fact, owned by Russian oligarchs. It quotes one diplomat as saying, quote, parading around preaching at your allies is all very well if you have sorted your own house out, end quote. And as we can see in Nicola Jennings' cartoon, right now it is Johnson, in her view, who is at the bottom of the heavy lifting of trying to get Vladimir Putin's tanks from not invading. It is Biden, Schultz, and Macron who are trying, as a last-ditch effort, according to the cartoon's captions, of not letting Russia invade Ukraine.
All right, next now, Solange, you've been looking at the data leak concerning Crédit Suisse.
Yeah, it is the German paper Süddeutsche Zeitung that received the whistleblower's data dump of 18,000 bank accounts worth some $100 billion. The paper explains that the whistleblower wanted to, quote, tear off the fig leaf that protects tax frauders. But the data, which was shared with a number of other media and outlets, also uncovered Crédit Suisse's okaying of funds from criminals, fraudsters, and corrupt politicians. That's as The Guardian tells it. Crédit Suisse denies the allegations, calling them insinuations and allegations. But there is more to this story than hiding ill-begotten money. As Le Monde explains, a Swiss law carries a 5-year sentence if someone divulges banking secrets. And a 2014 reinforcement of this law now means that not just bankers, but also the press as well could be charged. It has never happened, but the threat was enough for the Tribune de Genève to say no to the story, to pass on the story. And they say just about that in their editorial. They're raising grave concerns about the law and what it does to press freedom in Switzerland. And as we can see in the cartoon by Saad that accompanies the article, Switzerland's arms are tied on this one, while the country is okaying quite a bit of dirty money.
Solange, the Olympics have wrapped up now. The closing ceremony for the Winter Games was yesterday, Sunday, and the press is talking a lot about whether these games were a success or not.
Yeah, and from the viewpoint of the Chinese media, the games were, there's no surprise here, a roaring success. But for Libération, it was des JO pas Jojo. This is a word play that means that the games weren't much fun or they weren't too happy. Jojo means happy. Libé notes that there were successes, like the COVID bubble, but there were also failures like transportation to and from venues. But for Libé, the overall sentiment among athletes was that these games were just so-so. Disappointed or not with their experience, the conversation tells us that for athletes, this is a critical time. For many of them, their return home often means a time of depression and sadness for them. After 4 years of working towards this one goal, many struggle to return to normal normal life. Some 40% of those that retire struggle to accept life after the games. So to use Libération's expression of its not so happy headline, c'est pas Jojo, it's not so happy for many athletes right now.
All right, one athlete in particular might be in need of some very special cure, Solange.
Yes, indeed. It is the funny time now. New York Magazine asks how far one would go to participate in the games. What lengths would you go to be part of the Olympics? And I have a feeling that many men out there would say no to the following experience as the cut explains one cross-country skier from Finland, Remi Lindholm. He had the disappointment of coming in not only 28th, but also the awful surprise of having his penis freeze in the race.
That can happen?
Yes, that can happen. I just found that out. While competing for the 50-kilometer race mass start event, which was shortened to 30 kilometers because it was so cold out, yes, his most precious appendage did freeze. He told the media, quote, "When the body parts start to warm up after the finish, the pain was unbearable," end quote. And he should know it's actually the second time this has happened to him, poor man. But so it might be time for him to change sports or, and no pun intended here, but really actually a little bit, a muff. Maybe you should wear a muff of some sort.
Or maybe his next career will be coming out with some kind of like those warmers for your hands, something like that. Solange, thank you very much for that look at the press review today. Don't forget, you